welcome back to my channel. I am Amber from Amber's Books and More, and today I have my April wrap-up. I'm a little late on this because I've been sick and I've been super busy getting ready for a friend's wedding. I'm baking cupcakes for her, so I did pretty good though in the month of April, so let's just go ahead and jump right in and get started. So the first book I read in the month of April was for my history class, and it was actually Herbert Hoover, and this was written by William E. Leuchtenberg. And this was a very short little biography of him, and it was actually pretty interesting. I didn't really even know who Herbert Hoover was. I know he was a president, but I didn't really know much about him. And I thought it was kind of cool how they had the signature kind of on the naked cover here. But this is a book that I rented from my college bookstore, so this is going back. So I'm definitely not keeping this, but I did read this at the very beginning of the month. I believe I gave that one a 3 stars on Goodreads. So the next book I read was actually a comic, because after the end of last month when I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, I really needed something really quick and easy because I was really starting to come into like a hangover from that book. So I read Hellboy, the first volume of that. I will insert a picture here. And then that one, I believe I gave that 3 or 4 stars. I can't remember. But and then I read Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, sort of. I don't know. That one was really weird. I didn't really enjoy it very much. It was like the Sabrina the Teenage Witch TV show, but it was much more creepy and adult. No, I didn't care. I think I gave that 2 stars. I really did not care for that one. So then at this time, after I read those, this was the beginning of Tome Topple. So this is going to be a combination Tome Topple wrap-up and April wrap-up. So the first book that I read for the Tome Topple is definitely a chunker, and that is Stephen King. Not the name of the book. Doomy by Stephen King. This was about a man that lost his arm in a tragic accident, and then he goes to take vacation down into the Florida Keys to recuperate. His wife divorces him, and then he starts to paint, and then kind of his paintings in a way sort of start coming to life. I don't want to give anything away, but it's really creepy. It's really wonderful. It's Stephen King. I loved it, and I believe I gave this one 4 stars on Goodreads. So I would definitely recommend picking this one up if you are a Stephen King fan. This one came in at, I want to say it was like almost 600 pages. 607 pages. It's alright. So the next book that I read for the Tome Topple was Sarah J Maas, A Court of Mist and Fury. I absolutely loved this book. The first book in this series was just okay for me, but I really, really loved this one. And this one came in at a little over 600 pages, and it was wonderful, and I'm so glad that I read it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I will leave my book talk up above here if you want to check out more of my spoilery type thoughts on this. But this is definitely worth getting into, like getting past the first book to get into the series. I think this is definitely worth it. This is a great read. Alright, so the next book that I read for Tome Topple was in my TBR, I had Doomy, I had Akomaf, and I had this one, Ashley Bell by Dean Koontz. I read this in like a day, like 2 days maybe, a day and a half. This was so good. I loved it. It was thrilling, it was fast paced, it was kind of creepy, and kind of like, what the heck is even happening? There was twists, there was turns. I believe I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. I will leave all the links to the Goodreads for all this down below, because I am not going to go back in and look at it right now, but I believe I gave this 4 stars, and this is definitely worth the read if you enjoy Dean Koontz. You know, Dean Koontz has really went off on a separate way with his books, and I think this really brought back what I loved so much about my favorite book of all time, which is False Memory. So this really brought back that feeling of that book, and I really, really enjoyed this. Definitely pick this up. It's over 700 pages. I know it's big, but it is a fast read, I promise. So the next book that I read for Tome Topple, because I finished the 3 books I wanted to read and I still had like a week to go, so I was really excited to get a couple more books. So the next one I read, I don't have a physical copy. I read it on audiobook, but it was The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. So this one is more of a historical fiction. It's set in World War II, and it is told, the narrator is Death himself, and he's telling the story of Liesel, which is a German girl that is growing up in Nazi Germany, and it was definitely good. Now, I don't usually care much for historical fiction, but once I got through and started, like, just the way that Death spoke, and like he was so lyrical, and then once you get to the end, it was so worth it. And what's weird about this is that Death actually spoils things for you before they happen, and yet Marcus Zusak has a way of writing it that even though you've been spoiled for it 150 pages ago, when it happens, you still feel all the feels. So it's definitely a good read, especially if you like historical fiction. You will love it. You have to pick it up. But even if you don't really care for historical fiction like me, I did actually still quite enjoy it. So I gave that 4 stars on Goodreads, and I definitely recommend it. So the last book that I read for Tome Topple, and I finished with like an hour left of Tome Topple. I mean, I went right to the end with reading, and that was The Evolution of Mara Dyer. This was book 2 in the Mara Dyer, why can't I say that? Mara Dyer trilogy. That is a hard word for me to say. But anyway, so this one was, so I really liked the first one, and I liked the second one, but it did take a turn that, while I wasn't expecting it, and I think it was an intriguing turn, it's not really the story I signed up for, but I definitely still did enjoy it. I believe I still gave this like 3.5 stars on Goodreads, which I think I gave it 3 on Goodreads, or 4, but really it's like 3.5. But I did still enjoy it, and this one came in like right at 500 pages. It was like 504 or something, but definitely worth reading. So that was the end of Tome Topple, but of course there was still another week in the month of April, and I of course just kept on reading. So the next book I read was The Retribution of Mara Dyer, which was book 3 of the Mara Dyer trilogy. I got it right the first time that time. So this one definitely was a different read than the rest of them. This one was less about being in Mara's head and more about what was actually happening. So it was good. I enjoyed it. I believe I gave this 3 stars on Goodreads, and I am glad I finished this trilogy, and it was definitely great, and I loved Michelle Hodgkin's style of writing, but it did go in a different way than what I wanted it to personally. Maybe I should just write that book I wanted. I don't know, but either way, I did enjoy the trilogy. It is worth the read. I think that if book 1 wasn't the type of story you wanted, just keep reading, because it changes. I mean, it turns into a completely different story. So I definitely am glad that I finished that. That trilogy's done. Yay! I'm so glad I finished something finally. So you thought I was done, didn't you? No, I kept on reading. So the next book I read was the Javan Librarian's Book of the Month, and this was An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This was about a girl named Laya and a boy named Elias. Alaya, I'm making them into a couple name now. Laya was a scholar girl, and scholars are like looked down upon, right? So she became a slave in order to kind of infiltrate into the military evil people. And then you have Elias, which is a military evil person, but maybe not quite so evil. And he's trying to figure out a way to get out. So this is kind of like if you took post-apocalyptic and you took fantasy and you took, oh my god, dystopian, and you took all these different genres and you just stacked them into here. There was like these like trials that made the Hunger Games look like child's play. There was a little bit of romance, but not very much at all. I think that it was very good on the romance side. And we had a fantastic live show about this one for Java and the Librarians. And I definitely read this along with Julie, which is one of the Java and the Librarians. And we check out the check out the Facebook group where we kind of chatted about this, and then watch the live show. I'll link it up above. It was so much fun. But I definitely give this one 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. I didn't think I would, but I loved it. I know you're thinking like, wow, Amber, that's a lot of books. You did really good. I read one more. I read A Torch in the Night by Sabaa Tahir, which is book 2 of the Ember in the Ashes series. I had purchased this because I was looking for an Ember in the Ashes, and I saw this one at the store, and it was signed copy. So I grabbed it, and I'm glad I did, because as soon as I finished that one, I was like, no, I need more. that ended on a cliffhanger. I need to know what happens, and so I immediately picked this up, and I finished this on the last day of the month at like 11 p.m. I kid you not. This was so good. I also rated this one a 5 out of 5. This is about, so in that book, Laya was trying to infiltrate because she wanted to find out what happened to her brother. And in this book, it's basically they're going to find her brother. And it was so good. I don't want to say anything because it'll give it away. But 5 out of 5. I love them both. I cannot wait for book 3. It doesn't even have a name yet. But I'm still excited. I'm so glad that I'm caught up with the series. I recommend it. It is so good. So good. So besides Book Thief, which is a chunky book, oh my god, these are the books that I read in the month of April. Add another one on top of that because Book Thief, and then 2 comics that are not even on here. That's a lot of books. I did so good in April. I'm so proud of myself, guys. Alright, that's all I have for you today. I am having a bad week, like I said, so I'm going to be posting this one and my May TBR back to back right next to each other same day. So definitely check that out if you want to find out what I'm going to read for May. May is an exciting month. There are 2 books coming out that I'm so excited for, like palpitation excited. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. So have a nice day wherever you are. And I love you. Bye.